He told me I was replaceable. Like I was some object he could just swap out when he got bored. I laughed it off at first. But when I saw him with her, smiling like I never existed, something inside me shattered. And from those broken pieces, a version of me began to rise. Sharper, colder, unstoppable. He wanted to see me weak. Instead, he watched me glow in places he could never reach. The same words he once said to me, "You're replaceable," came back to him one night, spoken by a woman who looked just like me, but wasn't me. And that's when he realized, you can't play with hearts without one day becoming the game. Because sometimes, karma wears lipstick and smiles. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the Hard Revenge channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. We love to see how far our stories travel. The night was heavy with silence before the shouting began. The living room lights flickered as rain tapped against the window, matching the rhythm of their rising voices. He stood near the door, one hand gripping his phone, his face cold, almost emotionless. "You think you're special?" he snapped. "You're not. You're replaceable, Sophia." "Everyone is!" The words sliced through the air, sharp and deliberate. She froze. Not because of what he said, but because of how easily he said it. Her heart pounded, but her lips refused to move. For the first time, she saw him not as the man she loved, but as a stranger wearing his face. And as he turned away, she wondered, had he always thought this of her? When the door slammed shut, the echo felt like a gunshot. The house was still, painfully still, except for the faint ticking of the clock and the slow drip of rain leaking from the roof. Sophia sank onto the couch, her fingers trembling as she touched the side of her neck where tears had fallen. His words replayed again and again, louder each time. "Replaceable!" The air felt colder now, almost cruel. She whispered to herself, "If I'm replaceable, then why does it hurt him to leave?" But there was no answer. Only the hum of loneliness and the smell of his cologne fading into the night. Somewhere deep inside, something began to shift, a quiet spark beneath all that pain. Something that whispered, "Not anymore." By midnight, the storm outside had turned violent. Thunder rolled across the sky as if nature itself was mourning with her. Sophia stood by the mirror, her reflection pale and tired. Her mascara had streaked down her cheeks, her hair tangled, yet her eyes burned brighter than ever. "Replaceable," she murmured again, almost tasting the word like poison. Then she straightened her back and looked at herself differently, not broken, but beginning. She didn't know what she would do yet, but she knew one thing. She would never let anyone say those words to her again. Lightning flashed across her face, and in that moment, the sadness turned into something sharper. Revenge wasn't in her mind yet, but the seed had been planted. And deep inside, she felt it growing. A few weeks passed, but the sting of his words still clung to Sophia's skin like a bruise that refused to fade. One morning, while scrolling aimlessly through social media, her heart froze. There he was, smiling, holding another woman close. The caption read, "New Beginnings." Her stomach tightened. The air around her seemed to vanish. The girl looked perfect. Polished hair, bright lipstick, the kind of confidence Sophia once had before he broke it. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. It wasn't jealousy, and it was disbelief. How easily he'd moved on, how casually he erased her. The screen blurred with tears, and yet she couldn't look away. She whispered to herself, "Was I ever real to him?" But the only response came from the hollow sound of her own heartbeat. Days turned into nights that felt endless. Everywhere Sophia looked, she saw reminders of him. The coffee shop they used to visit, the songs they danced to, even the cologne of strangers walking by. She deleted his photos, but couldn't delete the ache they left behind. In the evenings, she would sit by her window, watching city lights blur through the glass as rain streaked down like quiet tears. Her mind replayed his voice, those cruel words. "You're replaceable." She tried to tell herself that she didn't care, but the truth pulsed beneath every breath. She did. And every picture of them together online was another knife turned deeper. She wanted to scream, but all that came out was silence. A silence that grew heavier with every passing day. One night, she couldn't take it anymore. She turned off her phone, walked into the bathroom, and stared at her reflection. Eyes swollen, lips trembling, heart aching. "No more," she whispered. The words came out shaky at first, but then stronger. No more tears. No more waiting. The woman staring back at her looked like a ghost of who she used to be. And for the first time, Sophia pitied that version of herself, the one who begged for love from someone who didn't value it. She wiped her tears, her voice steadier now. "If he can replace me so easily, then I'll become someone he'll never be able to forget." Her hand tightened around the edge of the sink, her knuckles pale, determination filling her veins. That night, the pain didn't disappear, but it changed shape. It became her fire. The days that followed felt like a blur, a slow, aching haze where time didn't move. It just hung. Sophia would wake up, stare at the ceiling, and wonder why the sunlight felt so harsh now. The world outside went on. People laughed, cars passed, and the city breathed. But inside her apartment, everything was frozen. Coffee tasted bitter. Her favorite music sounded hollow. Every little thing carried his shadow. The jacket still hanging behind the door, the half-empty perfume bottle he once said he loved. She thought deleting him from her life would delete the pain too, but memories don't vanish with clicks. They linger, quietly, cruelly, and every night, when the silence grew unbearable, she asked herself, when does it stop hurting? But the silence never answered. Sophia started staying up late, afraid of what dreams might bring. The city outside was alive with distant traffic, but her apartment felt like a tomb. The clock ticked too loudly, the shadows on her wall moved like ghosts of her past. Sometimes she'd pick up her phone, typing messages she'd never send. "Do you miss me? Was it ever real?" Then she'd delete them, ashamed of the weakness that still lingered. She played their old playlist, and the memories came rushing in. His laughter, his promises, his lies. The sound of her own sobs filled the room until she covered her mouth to keep the neighbors from hearing. But even through the pain, a strange numbness began to settle. The kind that doesn't break you anymore, it just hardens you. It happened one morning, simple, quiet, and unexpected. She was making coffee when her hand suddenly began to shake. The cup fell and shattered on the floor, and for some reason, that sound, that sharp, final crack, broke something inside her. She sank to the ground, glass around her feet, and cried harder than she ever had. Every word he said, every lie, every betrayal came rushing back all at once. She didn't fight it anymore. She let it all out. But as the tears dried, she realized something. This was the last time she would cry for him. Not because she was healed, but because there was nothing left to cry over. The girl who once begged for his love had died in that moment. And when she stood up, eyes red but steady, she whispered, "Now, I start again." Sophia didn't wake up one morning magically healed. She rebuilt herself, piece by fragile piece. At first, it was small things. Making her bed, opening the curtains, brushing her hair. Each act felt like reclaiming a little piece of control she'd lost. She started going on early walks, letting the cold morning air sting her skin. It reminded her she was still alive. Neighbors she used to ignore started greeting her again. Even the old lady at the cafe smiled when Sophia ordered her first coffee in weeks. But inside, her emotions were still tangled. Grief and anger danced together like a storm she couldn't escape. Still, she whispered to herself every morning, "Not yet, but soon." Soon she'd feel strong again. Soon she'd stop shaking every time she heard his name. Weeks passed, and one day Sophia stood before her mirror, really looked at herself. Her face was thinner, her eyes tired, but something new lived in them. A spark of quiet fire. She touched the faint lines on her cheeks, remnants of tears that had dried long ago. Instead of pity, she felt a strange kind of pride, like a survivor studying her battle scars. She began dressing differently, not to impress anyone, but to remember what confidence felt like. Colors replaced the dull grays she had been wearing. Perfume returned to her skin. Every reflection now whispered, "You're not broken. You're becoming." And though her smile still trembled, it no longer belonged to the girl who begged. It belonged to the woman who endured. One evening, Sophia stood on her balcony, watching the city lights shimmer like distant promises. She realized something. She no longer wanted him back. She wanted herself back. All the love she wasted on him. She began pouring into her own life, into painting, books, and silence that didn't hurt anymore. She found laughter again, not loud and careless like before, but soft and sincere. The world that once felt colorless started breathing again. She did too. But deep down, a colder, sharper awareness had grown inside her. Not everyone who says "I love you" means it. And while she had forgiven herself for falling, she would never forget how it felt to be replaced. That memory didn't weaken her. It forged her into steel. And as the night wind brushed against her face, Sophia whispered, "Your upgrade won't shine for long." It was an ordinary afternoon, or at least it seemed so. Sophia had gone to a cafe downtown, the same one she used to avoid because it reminded her of him. She ordered her coffee, lost in her thoughts, when a familiar laugh sliced through the calm air. Her heartbeat stumbled. That voice, she could never forget it. Turning slightly, she saw him, Daniel, sitting just a few tables away, with her. The upgrade. They looked like a glossy magazine couple, perfectly staged smiles, perfectly empty eyes. For a moment, Sophia's breath caught, but she didn't crumble. She just watched. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted her cup, but this time it wasn't weakness. It was restraint. She whispered to herself, "Not now. Just watch." And as she observed, she noticed something. Daniel didn't look as happy as before. The new girl, Chloe, looked restless. She kept checking her phone, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. Daniel's charm was still there, but his words had changed. There was irritation in his tone, the same tone Sophia had once ignored. Every time Chloe said something, he corrected her, just like he used to correct Sophia, casually cruel, dismissive. Sophia could see the cycle repeating, like watching a film she'd already survived. The laughter around them started to sound forced, hollow, mechanical. Sophia leaned back in her chair, her eyes cold but calm. This was the moment she realized something powerful. He hadn't changed. He didn't replace her because she wasn't enough. He replaced her because he never could love anyone deeply. The realization hit her like quiet thunder, and for the first time she felt pity, not for herself, but for the girl sitting across from him. As Daniel stood to pay the bill, his eyes flickered toward Sophia. The moment their gazes met, time seemed to slow. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. Shock, then discomfort, then something else. Regret? Sophia didn't look away. Her expression was calm, composed, and hauntingly unreadable. She smiled slightly, not to taunt, but to say, "You don't matter anymore." Daniel hesitated. His jaw tightened, his charm slipping for the briefest second. Chloe noticed. She looked at Sophia, confused, then back at him. The silence between all three of them buzzed with invisible tension, like static before a storm. Sophia stood, gracefully dropped her napkin on the table, and walked past him without a word. But as she passed, Daniel's voice cracked ever so slightly. "Sophia?" She didn't stop. She just smiled to herself and thought, now he knows what being replaceable feels like. Weeks passed after that cafe encounter, yet Daniel couldn't shake Sophia's face from his mind. At first, he tried to laugh it off. She looked desperate, he told Chloe, but his tone lacked conviction. Late at night, though, he caught himself scrolling through her old photos, the ones he once swore he'd deleted. He couldn't understand why she looked peaceful, happier even, as if losing him was freedom, not pain. Meanwhile, Chloe noticed his distraction, the lingering stare, the quiet mood. The arguments began small. "Are you even listening?" Then grew sharper, filled with suspicion and insecurity. The perfect image he had crafted began to blur, just like his reflection in the bathroom mirror after a long, cold shower. He stared at himself one night and muttered, "Why do I feel like I lost?" Outside, thunder rolled through the dark sky, soft, distant, but approaching. Daniel's charm started to wear thin. Chloe no longer smiled at his jokes. Her laughter was replaced by sighs and short replies. He blamed her, of course, told her she was ungrateful, told her Sophia never complained this much. That name slipped out more often than he realized, and each time it did, Chloe's eyes hardened. At work, Daniel began missing deadlines, distracted by a gnawing restlessness he couldn't explain. Everywhere he went, reminders of Sophia haunted him. A perfume in the hallway, a song in the car, even the cafe's coffee cup logo. Each one whispered her name like a curse he couldn't escape. One night, Chloe confronted him, her voice trembling with rage. "Are you still in love with her?" Daniel didn't answer. He just stared at her, right, because maybe for the first time he was afraid of the truth. While Daniel's world cracked quietly, Sophia's grew brighter. She wasn't plotting revenge in the way movies show it. No poison, no scandals, no traps. Her revenge was silence, success, and serenity, all the things he thought she could never have without him. She started her own event design business, something she had once dreamed of, while Daniel told her it was too risky. Photos of her new work began circulating online. Elegant, confident, radiant. One day, Daniel saw one by accident. It wasn't her face that shook him. It was her smile. The same one she'd lost because of him. He realized that she didn't just move on, she rose above. And in that quiet realization, something in him broke completely. Because she wasn't replaceable after all, she was unforgettable. And he was just another lesson in her story. Daniel woke up one morning to an empty side of the bed. Chloe was gone. No note, no text, just silence. Her perfume still lingered faintly in the air, mixing with the bitter scent of the coffee he hadn't finished. At first, he thought she was angry after their fight the night before. She'd accused him of still being in love with Sophia. But as the hours turned into days, that silence grew heavier. When she finally returned, she wasn't alone. A man dropped her off outside their apartment, confident, well-dressed, smiling. Daniel stood by the window, his heart pounding as he watched them. When Chloe came in, her face was cold, distant. The same look Sophia once had when she finally gave up on him. It hit him like déjà vu. The scene felt hauntingly familiar. For the first time, Daniel felt what Sophia once did. The sting of being replaced so easily. The next few weeks were chaos. Chloe stopped hiding her late-night calls, her secretive smiles, her sudden absences. Daniel confronted her one evening, slamming his hand on the table. "Who is he?" he demanded. She laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that echoed in the quiet room. "He listens, Daniel. Something you never did." Her words burned deeper than he expected. Every insult, every dismissive gesture he once gave Sophia now came back to him like a ghost. He realized that karma doesn't shout. It whispers, it mirrors, it teaches. And right now he was staring at his own reflection, just wearing a different face. One night, as Chloe left for work, he sat in the dark, gripping his glass of whiskey, whispering to himself, "I deserve this, don't I?" The silence that followed didn't answer. It only agreed. A month later, when Chloe finally moved out, Daniel was left alone in an apartment that felt too big for one person and too quiet for a man who once loved noise. He started scrolling through his old messages with Sophia, the ones he never deleted. Then suddenly a notification popped up. It was from her. Just one message. Funny how life always gives back what we give away. His throat went dry. She hadn't blocked him. She hadn't cursed him. Just those few words. Calm. Almost kind. He typed out a reply, then deleted it. He knew nothing he could say would change what he'd done or who he'd become. As he sat there in the dim light, he realized something painful. Sophia's revenge wasn't anger. It was peace, and that peace made her untouchable. Nights became Daniel's worst enemy. The apartment that once echoed with laughter now felt haunted by memories. Her footsteps, her laughter, her perfume faintly clinging to the air. He'd wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of a door creaking, only to realize it was the wind. But sometimes he swore he heard her voice, soft, whispering his name from the corner of the room. He'd sit up, sweating, heart pounding, whispering into the dark. "Sophia?" No answer, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant city outside. Yet the emptiness felt alive, breathing around him, waiting for him to confess something even he couldn't name. He started leaving lights on, afraid of the dark, afraid of what waited in it. Because in that silence he could feel her, not as a person, but as a presence that wouldn't forgive him easily. One rainy evening, Daniel poured himself another drink and stared into the mirror above the fireplace. For a moment he thought he saw someone standing behind him, a shadow, long and graceful. He turned quickly, but there was no one, just the dim flicker of the city lights through the curtains. He laughed nervously, trying to convince himself he was imagining things. But when he looked back at the mirror, his smile faded. There she was, Sophia, standing right behind his reflection, her expression calm but distant. Her eyes looked straight into his as if she was seeing through him, not at him. He blinked and she vanished. The whiskey glass fell from his hand, shattering on the floor. He whispered, "I'm sorry." But the word didn't sound real. It sounded too late. The next morning, Daniel found himself sitting at his desk, exhausted and pale. He pulled out an old envelope, one Sophia had left behind when she moved out. Inside was a photo of the two of them smiling, their arms around each other back when love still felt safe. He stared at it for a long time, then began to write on the back. "I was wrong. You didn't deserve my silence. You didn't deserve my pride. If I could go back, I would listen this time." The ink smudged as his tears hit the paper, small and silent. He folded it carefully and placed it in an envelope, sealing it with trembling hands. Then he set it by the window, letting the morning sun fall over it, as if light could somehow carry it to her. Outside, the wind picked up, scattering the fallen leaves like old memories. And as he watched, Daniel wondered quietly, was it forgiveness he wanted from her? Or freedom from himself? The nights grew colder, and the walls of Daniel's apartment seemed to close in on him. Every sound became amplified, the ticking clock, the dripping faucet, the wind sneaking through the cracks. But beneath those sounds, something else stirred, a whisper. It wasn't loud, but it was constant, brushing past his ear like cold breath. "You said I was replaceable." He froze each time it came, glancing around the dimly lit room, his pulse hammering in his throat. The words echoed, not just in his head, but around him, bouncing off the silence. He tried drowning them out with music, with laughter from the TV, with whiskey, but nothing helped. Every time he turned the lights off, the whisper grew stronger, until he began to dread his own home. And one night he whispered back, trembling, "What do you want from me?" But the silence that followed was worse than the voice itself. The next morning, Daniel couldn't stay inside anymore. He found himself driving through the city, aimless, lost in thought, until he stopped in front of her old apartment. The building was the same, but the windows looked empty, hollow, like a face without eyes. He stepped out of the car, his breath fogging in the chilly air, and stared up at the balcony where Sophia used to water her plants. The memory hit him hard, her laughter echoing, the way she'd call out, "You're late again!" with that half-annoyed smile. Now, there was nothing. No plants, no laughter, no warmth, just the rustle of wind through metal railings. A neighbor passing by stopped and looked at him curiously, recognizing his face. "You're the one she used to wait for, aren't you?" she said quietly. Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't. His throat closed up. He just turned and walked back to his car, feeling the weight of 100 unspoken apologies pressing on his chest. Back home, Daniel decided to let go of everything that reminded him of her. He gathered the photos, the letters, the perfume bottle she left behind, and placed them all in a small metal tray. The flame flickered to life, orange, hungry, and one by one, he dropped the memories into it. He watched the pictures curl, blacken, and turn to ash. But one photo refused to burn. It was the same one he had written on, the one that said, "I would listen this time." The edges burned, but her face remained untouched, her eyes frozen in that soft, knowing smile. He dropped it back into the fire again and again, but the center never caught. Frustrated, he crushed it in his hands. And when he did, He thought he heard her voice, gentle but cold. "You can't erase me, Daniel." "I'm the lesson you earned." The lights flickered once, then went out. The darkness in Daniel's apartment no longer felt like just the absence of light. It felt alive. Every corner seemed to breathe. Every reflection seemed to move when he wasn't looking. He started leaving his phone camera on at night, recording the silence, hoping to prove he was imagining things. But in the morning, when he replayed the footage, his blood ran cold. There, in the corner of the frame, a faint silhouette stood near his bed, unmoving. Long hair, slender figure, familiar. He paused the video and stared. The outline looked exactly like Sophia. He dropped the phone, his heart slamming against his ribs. "No," he whispered. "You're gone." But when he looked toward the corner where she had stood in the video, the curtain swayed slightly as if someone had just walked away, and the faint smell of her perfume filled the air again. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He sat on the couch with the lights dimmed, the city's glow barely touching his living room. His phone buzzed suddenly, making him jump. It was an unknown number. With shaky hands, he answered. But there was no voice on the other side, only a soft sound. A woman humming. He froze. It was the same tune Sophia used to hum when she cooked dinner. Slow, haunting, tender. "Who is this?" he said, voice trembling. The humming stopped. Then, after a long silence, a whisper came through. "Do you still think I was replaceable?" The phone slipped from his hand, hitting the floor. When he picked it up again, the call had ended. The screen glowed in the dark, showing a name that wasn't in his contacts. The next morning, Daniel looked wrecked. His eyes were hollow, his hands shaking as he poured coffee he didn't drink. He couldn't tell what was real anymore. The voice, the visions, the reflection in the mirror that smiled when he didn't. He told himself it was guilt, nothing more. But guilt couldn't make perfume linger, couldn't send text messages from a dead number. He scrolled through his phone again, desperate for logic, and found something new. A photo message. It was him, asleep in bed, the same night he'd left his camera running. And standing behind him in the darkness was Sophia's figure, clearer than ever, her eyes open, her hand resting on his shoulder. Daniel dropped the phone, breathing fast, the air around him thick and cold. For the first time, he said it out loud. "Sophia, what do you want from me?" And somewhere in the apartment, a voice answered softly, "You'll see soon enough." Daniel hadn't stepped outside in days. The curtains were always drawn, the air thick with the smell of stale whiskey and burnt candle wax. He had started talking to himself, or maybe to her. The whispers no longer came from one direction. They came from everywhere, the vents, the walls, even from under the floorboards. Each voice sounded like Sophia, but with a cruel calmness, as if she was watching him unravel piece by piece. He covered his ears and screamed, "Stop it!" But the voices only grew louder. They began to overlap, chanting the same sentence. "You said I was replaceable." Daniel slammed his hands against the wall, leaving streaks of blood where his nails dug into the paint. And then suddenly, silence. He turned around slowly, heart racing, and saw writing on the wall scrawled in red, "Now you are." Daniel hadn't looked in a mirror since the night he saw her reflection. But that morning he couldn't help himself. He needed to see if he still looked human. He walked into the bathroom, flicked on the dim light, and stared. At first it was just his face, pale, exhausted, hollow-eyed. Then behind him a shape began to form, faint and blurred, like fog taking form. Sophia. Her expression was unreadable, not angry, not sad, just disappointed. He whispered her name, his voice cracking. "Sophia, please." "I can't take this anymore." Her reflection moved closer while his stayed still. And when her lips moved, he heard the words in his head, not through his ears. "You never listened before." Why should I stop now? The mirror cracked suddenly, splitting her face in two. Daniel stumbled back, shaking, staring at the shattered glass, one half of her reflection still smiling at him. By nightfall, Daniel's phone buzzed again, another unknown number. This time, instead of ignoring it, he answered. A calm female voice spoke. "Mr. Hale?" I'm calling from the hospital. It's about Sophia. His breath caught. What about her? She left a note for you before she passed. We found it during the room's final cleanup. He froze, every muscle locking. Passed? He whispered. Yes, the voice continued. She died a week before you started seeing her messages. The call ended abruptly, leaving a static hiss that faded into silence. Daniel dropped the phone as the realization hit him. He had been haunted not by guilt alone, but by the echo of a woman already gone. He looked toward the cracked mirror again, and this time Sophia's reflection wasn't behind him. She was standing right in front of him. Daniel stood frozen, staring at Sophia's figure, her form half glowing in the dim light, her eyes soft but sharp, like glass. She wasn't the woman he remembered, not the one who smiled shyly at his jokes or clung to his arm during the rain. This version of her looked hollow, colder, as though pain had burned her clean from the inside out. You never meant it. That's the problem. She lifted her hand and the room changed. The walls dissolved into flashes of memory. There she was, sitting alone at the cafe where they first met, staring at the door, waiting for him. Then another image. Sophia crying on the bathroom floor, clutching her phone as his message popped up. I can't do this anymore. Don't text me again. The final vision was her walking toward a bridge on a rainy night, wind whipping her hair, tears running freely. Daniel's throat tightened. Stop! Please! But the images didn't stop. They wrapped around him like ghosts, whispering all the words he never said, all the apologies that came too late. Sophia's voice echoed through the haze. You said I was replaceable, but you were the one who got replaced. By your own guilt. When the visions faded, Daniel found himself standing in front of the cracked mirror again. Sophia's reflection stood within it, calm now, almost peaceful. She tilted her head slightly, her voice soft as wind through leaves. I didn't come to haunt you, Daniel. I came so you could finally feel. He stepped closer, tears streaming freely now. I do. I feel everything. And I hate it. She smiled faintly, not out of cruelty, but understanding. Good. That means you're still human. The mirror shimmered once, then her reflection began to fade like mist dissolving in sunlight. Daniel pressed his hand to the glass. Sophia, wait, don't go. Her last words lingered, almost inaudible. Let me rest, and maybe you'll find yours. And with that, the mirror cleared. Only Daniel's broken reflection remained. But as he looked closer, he noticed her eyes, faint, hidden, still watching from behind his own. The night outside had gone utterly still. No crickets, no wind, not even the whisper of the trees. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his trembling hands. They were cold, slick with sweat, as if the warmth of life had left them hours ago. The mirror across the room was now just a blank surface. Yet he could feel her gaze pressing from behind it. Every reflection, the glass, the phone screen, the dark window pane, seemed to hold her faint silhouette, watching, waiting. He tried to shake it off, whispering to himself, She's gone. She's gone. But deep down he knew she wasn't. Sophia had left the mirror, yes, but not him. And with every breath he took, it felt as if her sorrow was sinking deeper into his lungs, turning every heartbeat into a reminder. The house had grown too quiet, almost like it was listening. At 3:11 a.m., Daniel's phone buzzed, a soft vibration, persistent, like something alive beneath his pillow. He picked it up with shaking fingers. The screen showed an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. There was nothing at first, only the faint sound of rain, though it hadn't rained in days. Then a voice, familiar, distant, like an echo from underwater, whispered, You shouldn't have said those words, Daniel. He froze. It was Sophia's voice, unmistakable, trembling but calm. His throat closed up. Sophia? What do you want from me? The line went silent for a second, then came a soft reply. Not what you think. What you owe. And then, a faint, hollow laughter, before the call ended abruptly. Daniel dropped the phone, heart pounding, the words "you owe" ringing in his ears like a curse. Desperate for air, Daniel stumbled to the window and pushed it open. The night breeze hit him, damp, cold, heavy with the smell of earth. And in the distance he saw her. Sophia, standing at the edge of his driveway, her white dress swaying slightly, her face turned upward to the house. Her skin glowed faintly under the streetlight, almost transparent, as if she was caught between one world and the next. Daniel whispered her name, his voice barely a breath. But when he blinked, she was suddenly closer, standing just beneath the window. He stumbled backward, gasping, as her voice drifted in, calm and low. "You said I was replaceable, remember? So tell me, Daniel." Her face tilted upward, and for the first time, her eyes were filled not with sadness, but a terrifying calm. "Who replaces you?" The window shattered with a scream of wind, and everything went dark. Daniel woke to the sound of water dripping, slow, deliberate, echoing through the silence of the house. The room was dim, the morning light barely managing to push through the curtains. He sat up, dazed, only to notice the air felt different, heavy, wet, almost suffocating. The wallpaper near the mirror was peeling, curling at the edges like scorched paper, and beneath it, faint handprints had begun to form, pressed outward from the wall. He stumbled back, whispering, "This can't be real." But the house was alive now. The floorboards creaked with rhythm, as if matching his heartbeat. From the corner of the mirror, black water began to drip. Slow at first, then faster, spreading across the floor like a growing shadow. And in that reflection, Daniel saw something that froze him, himself, but standing still, smiling faintly while he trembled. The reflection raised a hand. Daniel didn't. "Why are you doing this?" Daniel shouted, his voice cracking as the mirror began to pulse like a heartbeat. The reflection of Sophia emerged, faint and glowing, her face softer than before. There was no anger now, only an unbearable sadness. "You never saw me," she whispered, her voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "You looked through me, talked over me, loved yourself in my reflection." Her eyes shimmered, not with tears but with flickering light like a dying flame. "I begged for you to hear me," she continued, stepping closer, her form shimmering in the broken glass. "But all you did was remind me that I was replaceable." Daniel's chest tightened. His breath grew shallow as the room filled with a whispering sound. Hundreds of voices, all whispering his name. Then Sophia leaned close to the glass, her face inches from his reflection. "You said you wanted an upgrade," she murmured. "So I became one." The lights flickered, and Daniel felt something cold wrap around his neck, invisible but real. He gasped, clawing at his throat, stumbling backward as the mirror began to ripple like water. The reflection wasn't his anymore. It was Sophia's, calm, composed, unblinking. Daniel tried to scream, but his voice was gone. His reflection, his own body inside the mirror, looked at him with wide, pleading eyes. Sophia stepped out from the glass like mist solidifying into form. She was radiant now, pale but alive, her features restored, her eyes glowing faintly with eerie serenity. Behind her, in the mirror, Daniel saw himself, trapped, banging against the glass, soundless. Sophia turned, glanced once at the mirror, then back to the room, whispering, "Now you'll finally know what it feels like, to be unseen." The glass hardened, the reflection froze, and Daniel's face disappeared into darkness. Sophia smiled faintly, her breath steady as the last drip of black water hit the floor, and vanished. The morning after was eerily still. The rain that had lashed against the windows all night had stopped, leaving the world washed clean but lifeless. Sophia stood in front of the mirror, now smooth, clear, and silent. No cracks, no black stains, no whispering voices. Just her reflection, perfectly still. She looked peaceful. But there was a strange distance in her eyes, like she was looking through herself instead of at herself. Her hands trembled slightly as she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's over," she whispered, though her tone carried neither relief nor joy. The house felt empty, yet heavy, as if holding its breath. Outside, a faint breeze stirred the curtains, and for a moment, Sophia could swear she heard Daniel's faint voice, muffled, far away, like trapped behind glass. Her lips parted slightly. Was it really over? Or had something just begun? Sophia tried to live as though life had returned to normal. She made coffee, opened the curtains, and sat by the window where the morning light touched her face. But every reflection betrayed her. In the toaster, in her phone screen, in a puddle on the floor, Daniel's face would flicker for a second, twisted in silent desperation. Sometimes she heard the faint hum of his voice in the static of the TV or the vibration of her mirror when the wind blew. And each night before bed she would glance at the mirror one last time. And there he'd be. Still there, watching. "Stop looking at me," she whispered one night, gripping the sink. Her reflection stared back, but this time it blinked half a second later than she did. Her hand froze midair. "Daniel?" she breathed. The reflection smiled, not her smile, but his. Weeks passed. The neighbor said Sophia had become quieter, more distant, always talking softly to herself. One day, they saw her sitting in front of the mirror for hours, unmoving. When they knocked, no one answered. The police found the house empty, coffee half finished, candles burned to the wick, and a faint scent of jasmine lingering in the air. The only thing left was the mirror, gleaming, untouched. And in it, two figures stood side by side, Daniel, his eyes hollow but calm, and Sophia, smiling faintly, her hand resting against his. But there was something different about her. Her reflection blinked before her as if she was the one now inside,